Jack Sterling sat in the cockpit of the Bold Venture, muttering to himself as the ship's alarms blared. "Easy, girl. I've landed rougher than this and lived to tell the tale." His hands flew across the console, flipping switches in what could only be described as controlled chaos. The ship jolted violently, and the horizon outside tilted sharply. "Brace for a softish landing," Jack shouted to no one but himself. With a final groan, the ship careened onto a shimmering aquatic surface, skidding across the gravity-defying waters of Nerion 9. The craft sputtered to a halt, smoke curling lazily from the rear thrusters. Jax unbuckled himself and surveyed the alien world outside. Waves seemed to float in midair, suspended by invisible forces, while the bioluminescent flora pulsed in hues of green and blue. "Looks like a trippy rave," Jax muttered, grabbing his multi-tool and stepping out onto the oddly stable water. "Time to make a first impression," he said, adjusting his jacket and striking what he thought was a heroic pose. A small crab-like creature scuttled by, unimpressed. "Tough crowd." As he walked, or rather stumbled, across the water's surface, he spotted movement in the distance. Squinting, he saw a figure flailing in a vortex of churning, glowing water. Without hesitation or much thought, Jax sprang into action. "A damsel in distress? My specialty!" He bolted forward, only to trip over his own feet and face plant into the surprisingly soft water. Spluttering, he pulled himself up. "Okay, not my smoothest start," he muttered, resuming his awkward sprint. The figure, an alien woman with sleek, shimmering skin and glowing patterns that shifted like waves, was clearly struggling against the vortex's pull. Jax yelled, "Hold on! I'm coming!" She turned her head, her large, luminous eyes locking onto his, a mix of surprise and hope crossing her face. Diving into the vortex, Jax realized two things immediately. First, the water felt like gelatin mixed with static electricity. Second, he had no idea how to swim in it. "Okay, Jax, improvise," he gasped, flailing toward the alien. With a desperate lunge, he grabbed her arm and pulled, their bodies spinning together in the current. "Don't worry, I've got you," he shouted. The alien woman's expression suggested she was skeptical. After several frantic moments of kicking and floundering, they finally broke free of the vortex's grip. Jax dragged her to a calmer patch of water, both of them panting. "See? Easy," he wheezed, attempting a cocky grin. The alien woman sat up, her glowing patterns flickering softly as she studied him. "You are not of this world," she said in a melodic, slightly puzzled tone. Jax blinked. "And you're not from Jersey, but I'm not judging." She tilted her head, clearly processing his words. "You saved me. I am Lysaira of the Nyarans." "Who are you, strange one?" "Captain Jack Sterling, intergalactic adventurer, hero, and part-time mechanic. But you can just call me Jax." He extended a hand, then quickly retracted it, realizing he had no idea if handshakes were a thing here. Lysaira gave a small, almost amused smile. "Thank you, Jack Sterling. Your actions are unorthodox." "Unorthodox is my middle name," Jack said, puffing out his chest. He quickly deflated when she raised an eyebrow in what could only be described as polite disbelief. She stood, her movements graceful despite the ordeal she just endured. "You must come with me. The village will wish to honor your courage." Jax's eyebrows shot up. "Honor my courage? Sounds like my kind of party. Lead the way, Lysaira." As they began their trek across the shimmering water, Jax couldn't resist a parting comment. "Just so you know, I don't save lives for the accolades. I do it because it's the right thing to do." Lysaira glanced at him, her glowing patterns rippling slightly. "Your humility is noted, Captain Sterling." Jax grinned, clearly missing the sarcasm. "Thanks. I try." Behind them, the vortex settled back into calm, the strange waters reflecting the alien skies above as if nothing had ever disturbed them. Jax, however, had a feeling his day was only just getting started. Jax followed Lysaira across the shimmering surface of the alien water, his boots squelching awkwardly with each step. He tried to mimic her effortless, gliding movements but only managed to look like a malfunctioning robot. "You make this look easy," he said, nearly slipping again. Lysira turned her head slightly, her glowing patterns rippling faintly in amusement. "We are born to this environment, Captain Sterling. You, however, seem determined." "Determined is just a fancy way of saying naturally gifted," Jax replied with a wink. Lysira's expression remained unreadable, though Jax convinced himself she was impressed. As they approached her village, Jax's jaw dropped. The settlement floated on the water like an intricate mosaic of glowing domes and spiraling towers. Nairans moved seamlessly between air and water, their lithe forms weaving patterns of light as they swam or walked. The entire place seemed alive, pulsing softly with an energy Jax couldn't quite explain. "This is amazing," he admitted, his usual bravado giving way to genuine awe. Lysira nodded. "The village of Nere has stood for many generations. It is both a sanctuary and a testament to our harmony with the currents of life." Jax scratched his head. "Yeah, sure. Harmony and currents. Totally got it." As they entered the village, the residents stopped what they were doing to observe Jax. Their glowing forms crowded around him, curious murmurs filling the air. Jax grinned and gave a little wave. "Hey there! Don't all rush at once. There's plenty of me to go around." One of the elders, a regal Nair and with swirling golden patterns, stepped forward. Her voice was melodic but firm. "You are the off-worlder who saved Lysira?" Jax puffed out his chest. "That's me. Jax Sterling. Hero, adventurer, all-around great guy. You're welcome, by the way." The elder tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "It is rare for an outsider to show such bravery. We will honor you with the ceremony of bonding." Jax froze, his grin faltering. "Bonding? Could you maybe elaborate on that? Just so we're all on the same page." Lysira stepped closer, her tone soothing. "It is a sacred ritual to honor shared life energy. Through it, you will connect deeply with our people." Jax's mind raced. Shared life energy sounded both intriguing and potentially risky. "Right. And this bonding, it's not, permanent, is it?" The elder's golden patterns pulsed faintly. "It is an honor that no outsider has ever been granted. Prepare yourself, Captain Sterling. The ceremony will reveal your true essence." Jax blinked. "Revealing my true essence? That sounds intimate." Lysira stifled what Jax could have sworn was a laugh. "You will adapt, Captain? Your kind is known for resilience, is it not?" "Resilience is my middle name," he said, swallowing hard. As the villagers dispersed to make preparations, Lysira led Jax to a small, glowing alcove. Inside was a pool of water that shimmered with an otherworldly light. "This is where you will cleanse yourself before the ceremony," she explained. Jax eyed the pool suspiciously. "Cleanse myself? Like a space bath?" Lysira frowned slightly. "It is not merely physical cleansing. The water will align your internal currents and prepare your spirit." Jax sighed. "Right. Aligning my currents. Of course." He began unbuckling his boots, muttering under his breath. "Always with the rituals. Never just a handshake and a thank you." As he stepped into the water, a tingling sensation spread up his legs. "Whoa! That's tingly." Lysira watched him, her expression calm. "You may find it revealing." Jax froze mid-step, suddenly hyper-aware of how little he understood about this culture. "Revealing? Like metaphorically, right?" Lysira's faint smile did little to reassure him. When the cleansing was complete, Jax emerged from the pool feeling oddly energized. "All right, currents aligned, spirit prepped. Let's do this." Lysira led him to a central platform where the villagers had gathered. The elder raised her hands, her voice resonating across the crowd. "Let the ceremony of bonding begin." Jax looked around nervously as the villagers chanted phrases that sounded suspiciously suggestive to his human ears. "Merge the streams, align the flows, release the pressure." "Okay, just to be clear," Jax whispered to Lysira. "This isn't some kind of weird alien wedding, right? Lysira raised an eyebrow. You worry too much, Captain. Trust the currents. Jax tried to laugh, but it came out more like a wheeze. Yeah, sure. Trust the currents. No problem. As the ritual began, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that he was in way over his head. Jax stood on the glowing platform, his nerves on edge as the chanting grew louder. The villagers moved in unison, their bioluminescent patterns pulsating in a mesmerizing rhythm. Okay, no big deal, Jax muttered to himself, trying to steady his breathing. Just a little cultural exchange. Totally normal. Lysira stepped forward, her presence commanding yet serene. She extended a hand toward Jax, her glowing fingers outstretched. Captain Sterling, the bonding begins with a connection of energies. Place your hand in mine. Jax hesitated, glancing at her hand and then at the watching crowd. No offense, but this doesn't involve anything permanent, does it? I'm kind of a free spirit. Lysira tilted her head, her expression unreadable. The bond is an experience, not a tether. It will enrich both our worlds. Jax sighed, squaring his shoulders. All right, let's do this. He placed his hand in hers, and immediately felt a surge of warmth. His vision blurred for a moment, and he swore he could hear faint whispers at the edge of his mind. The elder stepped forward, her golden patterns shimmering brightly. Now, the synchronization of streams. She gestured toward the platform, and water began to rise around them in elegant spirals. Jax blinked, trying to process what was happening. Is the water supposed to do that? It responds to the bond, Lysira said, her voice calm. Focus on the connection. Jax closed his eyes, though focusing wasn't easy when the water began wrapping around him like living ribbons. He felt a strange sensation, as if his thoughts were being gently nudged, guided by an unseen force. Images began to flood his mind, glimpses of Lysira's world, her people, and their deep connection to the planet. He saw their struggles, their joys, and their hopes. But then, to his surprise, the images shifted. He saw himself, standing in the cockpit of the Bold Venture, shouting at malfunctioning controls. He saw himself as others might, brash, overconfident, but with an undeniable spark of resilience. Well, that's humbling, he muttered. Lysira's voice cut through the haze. The bond reveals truth, Captain. It reflects what is, and what could be. Great, Jax replied, his voice tinged with sarcasm. I always wanted my insecurities broadcast to an entire village. The water swirled faster, and the whispers grew louder. Jax couldn't tell if they were coming from the villagers or his own mind. Okay, this is starting to feel a little intense, he said, his voice rising. Lysira tightened her grip on his hand. Trust the currents, Jax. Let them guide you. I'm trying, he shouted, his free hand flailing as the water enveloped him. But your currents are a little pushy. The elder raised her hands, her voice booming. The bond nears completion. Captain Sterling, embrace the connection. Jax wanted to yell something witty, but the swirling energy around him made it impossible to think straight. Suddenly, the water surged upward, and a burst of light enveloped the platform. When the light faded, Jax found himself standing in silence. The villagers were staring at him, their expressions a mix of awe and curiosity. Lysira stepped back, her glowing pattern shimmering softly. You have completed the bonding, the elder said. The currents of our world now flow within you. Jax blinked, struggling to find words. So, what does that mean exactly? Am I like part fish now? Lysira smiled faintly. It means you are connected to us, and to this world. You carry a piece of our essence within you. Jax scratched his head. That's cool, I guess. Do I get a badge or something? The elder stepped closer, holding out a small, glowing crystal. This is your reward, Captain. A resonance shard, forged from the bond. It will allow you to sense and communicate with our people, even across the stars. Jax took the crystal, turning it over in his hand. A fancy alien rock. Not exactly what I was expecting, but I'll take it. Lysira's gaze softened. It is more than a rock, Jax. It is a symbol of trust, and a bridge between our worlds. Jax grinned. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds pretty important. Guess I'll try not to lose it. The villagers began to disperse, their patterns dimming as the ceremony concluded. Lysira lingered, her eyes studying Jax. You handled the bond better than I expected, she said. Jax smirked. What can I say? I'm full of surprises. Lysira's faint smile returned. Indeed you are. As Jax pocketed the crystal, he couldn't shake the feeling that his adventure on Nerion 9 was far from over. Jax sat on the edge of the village's central platform, the glowing resonance crystal rolling between his fingers. He stared out at the alien horizon, where the sky met the shimmering waters of Nerion 9 in a surreal blend of color and light. For once, he was quiet, his usual cocky grin replaced by something more thoughtful. Lysira approached, her steps soundless on the strange, fluid-like surface. She sat beside him, her glowing patterns faint but steady. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I've been to a lot of places, Jax finally said, breaking the silence. Seen a lot of weird things. But this is different. Lysira tilted her head, her gaze fixed on him. Different can be unsettling for some. Not for me, Jax replied quickly, though his tone lacked its usual bravado. I mean, sure, I usually know what I'm getting into, fly in, fix a problem, maybe flirt a little, and fly out. But here it's like, I don't know. Like the place doesn't just exist. It feels alive. Lysira's patterns rippled faintly, her version of a nod. Nerion 9 is alive, in its own way. The currents you experienced are part of a greater whole. To bond with them is to understand our unity. Jax chuckled softly. Unity, huh? Back on Earth, we barely agree on what toppings belong on pizza. Unity's not exactly our strong suit. Lysira raised an eyebrow, clearly unfamiliar with the reference. Your people may lack unity, but you possess resilience and determination. Traits that allowed you to save me, despite your unconventional methods. Jax smirked. Unconventional is my specialty. Lysira's lips curved into the faintest smile. So I've noticed. They sat in silence again, the air between them comfortable yet charged with unspoken thoughts. Jax couldn't help but glance at her, noting the way her glowing patterns shifted subtly with her emotions. So, he said, his voice light but curious. What happens now? I've got this fancy crystal, and apparently I'm connected to your world. Does that make me an honorary Nairan or something? Lysira's gaze softened. The crystal is a bridge, not a title. It is a tool to remind you of this connection, should you ever need it. But whether you choose to honor the bond is entirely up to you. Jax frowned, rolling the crystal between his palms. You make it sound like some kind of cosmic responsibility. I'm not exactly the poster boy for responsibility. Perhaps not, Lysira said, her tone light. But you are capable of more than you believe. Jax snorted. You're not the first person to say that. Usually it's right before they hand me a job I don't want. Lysira leaned slightly closer, her expression thoughtful. You underestimate yourself, Jax. You may be flawed, but there is strength in your imperfections. They make you adaptable, resourceful. Human. Jax blinked, caught off guard by her words. You really believe that? Lysira's glowing patterns brightened briefly. I do. For a moment, Jax didn't know how to respond. He was used to being admired for his boldness, his wit, his devil-may-care attitude. But this was different. Lysira wasn't impressed by his usual antics. She saw something deeper, something he wasn't even sure he believed about himself. Well, he said finally, guess I've got some thinking to do. But, don't expect me to become a saint overnight. I'm still Jack Sterling, after all. Lysira's smile widened just slightly. I wouldn't expect anything less. As the sun, or whatever passed for a sun on Nerion 9, began to dip below the horizon, Jack stood, tucking the crystal safely into his jacket. All right, Lysira. I think it's time for me to get back to my ship, see if I can get her flying again. Lysira rose gracefully, her movements fluid as ever. If you require assistance, our engineers are skilled in both mechanical and energetic repairs. Jax raised an eyebrow. Energetic repairs? Sounds fancy. But I think I'll take you up on that. Could be useful to have a ship that's in tune with the currents, or whatever. Lysira nodded. I will make the arrangements. Jax hesitated, then offered her a lopsided grin. Thanks, Lysira. For everything. Saving you was probably the craziest thing I've ever done, but I don't regret it. Nor do I, she replied, her patterns glowing softly. As Jax walked back toward the village, he couldn't help but glance back at Lysira, standing serene and radiant against the backdrop of her glowing world. For the first time in a long time, Jax felt like he was leaving a place better than he found it. And maybe, just maybe, it had left him a little better too.